It's good to see some of you here, and also hello to those of you who are watching on the live stream. My name's Pegman, and I'm from the Department of Work and Pensions. Myself and my colleague Paul Ainsworth are going to give you a talk today about some of the work that we do in the Department of Work and Pensions. So we're part of a very small team of data scientists. There's now 4 of us. We've just grown from 3 to 4 in the last few weeks. And what our job is to help agile projects deliver new digital services for the Department of Work and Pensions. So as data scientists, we think that there's a lot of wealth of data in the department, lots of information, and also externally that we can bring in as well. And it's really hard for people who aren't data scientists to understand all the vast array of data that's out there. So one of the really important things is to help summarize the data, make it clear to people, tell the stories of what the data's showing, and presenting that to people so then they can make better evidence-based decisions. So decisions based on data and evidence rather than just guessing, so they can know what to expect or who's infected or whatever. So our job is to tell a story about what the data shows and to communicate it well in a way that people can understand. So, not sort of like loads of statistical things that will make people get confused, but ways that they can use that data and actually then apply it to their projects. So today we're going to show some examples of how we do this using RStudio. So it's going to be a bit technical. We're not actually using the real data in the real projects today due to the sensitivity of things that we're working on. But we have used some open data from a website called NoMiss, which has lots of government and external data on it that you can have a look at. And we're going to demonstrate the tools and the techniques we use in RStudio to communicate these data insights to people. So we're going to have 3 sections of this talk today. So I'm going to talk for about 20 minutes and show you a package called rmarkdown that we use. And then Paul Ainsworth is going to talk to you about a package called flexdashboard, which is an extension of rmarkdown. And then we'll have some time for questions, and we can maybe tweak a few things and be a bit interactive if you've got things you would like to know about. So, just to say, we're not experts in this, so we're just doing this as part of our job. We're here to show you what we've done, but we might not be able to answer every question that you've got. If not, we'll take away questions and get back to you. But we're just really sharing the work that we've done to see if it can help anyone else. And some of the charts we're going to show you might not be the best charts for the data, but we haven't had very long to look at the actual data itself, but it does give you the ideas and the capabilities of what RStudio can do for data visualization. We'll have opportunities for questions at the end of each section. At the end of my part, I'll stop and ask for questions from the floor and also online. So if you're online, you could be typing questions and we'll pick those up at that point. And then Paul will ask for questions at the end of his section, and then there'll be a longer session at the end to build on any of those questions and follow up on things. Also, if you have further questions and you want to talk to us, we'll be available afterwards when there's some more coffee. So I'm going to start by playing a video which introduces what rmarkdown is. So hopefully the sound will work on this. So let's try this.
What is rmarkdown? An authoring framework for data science. You can use an rmarkdown.
Hang on, I don't think it's coming through the speakers. 1 second. Okay, let's try again. Sorry for that.
What is rmarkdown? An authoring framework for data science. You can use an rmarkdown file to connect to data and run code, as well as to generate reports of your work. An rmarkdown file is a simple plain text file with 3 types of content: code chunks to run, text to display, and metadata to guide the rmarkdown build process. Open an rmarkdown file in the RStudio IDE for a productive notebook interface. Write your code in R or use another language like Python or SQL. Call the render function to build a report from your file, or simply click the knit button in the RStudio IDE. rmarkdown exports your file into a familiar format, running your code and embedding the results in your finished document. You can customize how your code and text are displayed, or you can create parameters to pass to your code to use at render time. RMarkdown builds many familiar formats like HTML, PDF, and Word documents, slideshows, dashboards, HTML-based notebooks, books, websites, interactive apps, custom templates, and many more. In every case, your RMarkdown file remains as a reproducible record of your work, easy to track in a version control system like Git, and easy to deploy again in the future.
Okay, so RStudio being open source, there's a lot of people using it, and there's lots of guidance online to help you with this if you haven't used it before. So this is a website. This is a website here which has some guidance. Apologies for the interruption with the phone. So it has the video I've just played, and it tells you how to get started, and it's got lots of links on it. So first thing you need to do, if you've not used RMarkdown before, if you've got RStudio, is to install the package RMarkdown. So all you'd have to do is run that in your RStudio code window. So I've already done that in RStudio, so I can demo how it works to you. But that's one of the things you have to do before you can get started. So RStudio looks like this. Have any of you used RStudio before? Yes, a few nods, that's good. So in RStudio, you've got different types of code you can run. And to create a new document, you can go to File, New File, and you can create an R script and different things as well. You can also click on this arrow here and then select your new item there. So if you've done install packages on Markdown, you'll then see in the list there our Markdown item you can select. So I'm going to select that. You can give it a title, so we'll call it Newcastle, and click OK. Oh, you can also choose which format you want it to output to, so you can output it to a PDF or Word, but today I'm going to do it as a web page in this demo, but you can do other formats. Then it opens up a basic template for you to have a look at. So it's put the title that I entered here, Newcastle. It's put output HTML document, so if you change your mind after you've created it, you just have to change what it says there. It then has these different chunks of code. So the grey bits are bits of code that you can put in, where you can summarize data sets and produce tabulations and things. So you can code here. The bit here tells you it's a bit of R code, and then you just give a name to each chunk. You can then put options after each chunk. Echo equals false means that it then won't actually print out the code. It will just print out the output of the code. So here it's doing a plot of the pressure data, and it's going to plot the data, but it won't actually show that code. Whereas here it doesn't have that option, so when it does that, it's going to show the code. There's also different formats. There's lots of guidance on this. So this is basically a title, which is a section, because it's got these two hashtags at the front. And then it's got normal text here. It's got a hyperlink in arrow brackets. And it's got the word knit in 2 stars. And 2 stars means it'll be in bold when it actually prints out. So initially this might be a bit daunting, but there's actually loads of guidance online. So on here, you can click a link to a cheat sheet, and you get something like this. And this tells you all about how to get headings, how to get bullets and things like that. So it takes you through step by step. If you put 1, you get a header 1, 2 hashes, you get a header 2, things like that. So there's lots of guidance on actually how to structure an RMarkdown document here. And there's also a really detailed reference guide online as well, which goes into a bit more detail and examples of how to do that as well. So this is a basic template that it sets up for you, and I'm just going to show you how this works. I'm not going to make any changes to it. So if I click the word knit, then what it's doing is converting that code into the HTML file that it asked for. So I'm going to call it Newcastle. So you have to save it. And then I'm going to open this in a browser. So here it's got the output of the file, so it's got Newcastle as a title, and then here it's got the first subtitle on Markdown, it's got the text, it's got a hyperlink there that I can click on because it was in those arrowed brackets. The knit word is in bold because it had those 2 stars on each side, and you can see the code printed out here and the output of the code. However, the second one, it's got the text, but it hasn't actually got the code because it had the echo equals false parameter added to the title of the section. So this is quite a useful thing. This is a basic template, but you can actually customize this with lots of additional things to make it look a bit better and add more information into it. So I'm going to show you one that we've developed for a demonstration today. So, we go back to RStudio. So this is an example of markdown report that I've created today. I've put my name there as the author, Penny Pegman. I want it to be an HTML document. And then you can put additional options in the HTML document. So I want to add a table of contents, which is this section here. And I want it to collapse so it's not all visible straight away. Then I've got all my sections of code. Now, to begin with, I'm loading lots of libraries that I might need for this particular document. And then reading in some data, renaming and shaping my columns. And that was from the previous one. I'm looking at grouping things into age bands, subsetting to look at some local areas to see what the data shows for local areas. So I'm deciding to look at Newcastle, North Tyneside, South Tyneside, Gateshead and County Durham. And then I'm doing some different percentages and things like that. One of the advantages of this document, and why we like using it on our team, is it's really reproducible when you get new data. If you're just kind of running normal code, you have to output it to Excel and update everything manually. This can read in the new data and output to into a file, and it does it all automatically, so you don't have to manually format charts and things. So what you can do is assign different variables in your data. So publication date, I've taken that to be today and formatted it in a particular way. And then you can then refer to that in your text. So this is a bit of text that will say it's published. And then this is just tags, HTML tags to highlight it. And then you can quote that variable and it will then update that in the text. So some bits where manually you might have to change in a kind of Word environment, here it will automatically feed through from the data. So you could say take that as the highest value and then take the maximum value from a variable in your data set, and then you can refer to it in the text by calling that variable name in the text. So I'm just going to show you what this looks like, and then I'll show you a bit more of the code. So actually, I'll knit it first so you can actually see it run live. So this doesn't take very long to run. It's pulling in several CSVs of data and then producing the output. Okay. So this is the example R markdown report. So as you can see, you've got the main title here, my name, so people know who to contact if they've got a question about it. The date that we've published it, so that's where the interactive dates come from, because I've ran it today, so it's got the date. We find that's really useful when we publish things internally so that people can see, is it latest version or is it out of date, is it a new one coming? Then we've got an introduction. I've put a few bullets in there by using the star symbol in the actual text of the code. I've put a word in bold. And then you can see I've got this table of contents. This is the TOC you saw at the top of the code. It enables people to click through sections, which is quite helpful to break it up by the headings. So this is based on census data as an example today. One of the things that we've looked at here is trying to use colours that are good for people who are colourblind. So there is a really good website about colours that you can use. So this is a good website here. It talks about all the palettes you can use in RStudio, all the different colours that are available to you. And then it has a section on which ones are colourblind friendly as well. So you can display all the colourblind friendly palettes and then choose one of these palettes here if you want to use particular colours. You can also get what the codes are for the individual colours in one of those palettes, so you can use them in your code. So that's quite useful. So here we've picked some colourblind friendly colours, and we're showing how Newcastle compares to some of the other local authorities in the area. So this might be useful when we're working with digital teams, because they might want to know if they're going to do a test. Where should they do a test or a pilot? And is that area similar to other areas, or is it different? How does it look compared to other areas? So here we've got a kind of bar chart showing the different populations in these areas, and you can actually see the numbers as well. So we kind of show the numbers on the ends, but you can see the relative size from the charts. And then we've looked a bit at the age distribution to look at how the populations change between the different areas. So here you can see that we go from the pale colours, which are the younger children under 16, all the way through to darker colours, and eventually 65 and over, or in dark blue. So you can see that Newcastle has slightly less older people 65 and over than some of the other areas. So that might be of relevance if you're doing a test somewhere. But it enables people to look at their distributions. Then we've looked at health problems and disabilities from the data. So this is showing on the census those people who declared they had a health problem or disability, and whether or not it limited their life and their day-to-day work. So grey is like not limiting them at all, of those who have a health condition, and yellow is limits a little, and blue is limits a lot. So you can see here that in Newcastle, 81% of people who have a health condition, which is about 227,000, have a health condition that doesn't limit them, and 9% limits them a little, and 10% limits them a lot. So you can see there's less people in Newcastle than Durham that have a health condition. But again, that might be due to the relative size of the populations, which is why we started with the population chart to give some context. But you can also see that that's about average for those that have limiting a little or limit a lot, usually about 9 to 12%. So they're all quite consistent. We then looked at social economic status, and here we've done a tree map, which is a bit like a pie chart where the areas of the squares represents the size that are in each thing. So here, this isn't the best chart for this, but there's loads of categories. So we start off with higher managerial occupations, and it goes through to people, students, and those who've never worked before. So pie charts aren't ideal because it's hard to judge angles. These are slightly better because judging areas is usually a bit easier. But again, it's not the best chart for this, and there's probably better things that you could do if you actually wanted to display this data. But it's just showing you some of the things that you could use. And one of the things that we've done here is use the same colours as we did in the first chart with the populations. So Newcastle is purple, and Newcastle's purple up in the first chart up here. So it enables people to follow things through, and if they want to find the same local authority across charts, they can do so. Here we've got qualifications. So this is a demonstration of how you can add a table into your report. So people might want to see what the data looks like. So here we can see what the populations are, age 16 and over, percentage with no qualifications, and those percentages that are doing apprenticeships. There's lots of things you could look at here. There's loads of data in the census data. But as you can see here, Newcastle and North Tyneside are quite similar percentage of those with no qualifications, around 23%. As you can see that in other areas, South Tyneside, Gateshead and County Durham, it's a bit higher, around 28%. This is another example here of some time series data from NoMiss, some benefit claimant data. So what you might have noticed, as I scroll over here, this qualifications thing, as I scroll down, we get a subcategory appearing. So you can have subcategories within your categories. So if you then click on benefit claimants, you can then click on ESA claimants over time. So you can have sub bits. So this is a Plotly chart that we've embedded in here. If you've used RStudio, you'll know what Plotly is. So this is a bit of an interactive chart. Some of the features we have here is that you can hover over and see the dates and the numbers as you move across. You can do things like compare data on hover, so you can move across and it will show you all the different values. We also have on here the ability to zoom in. So, trying to use a mouse here. Zoom, so it's not working. Okay. I have proper mouse, that usually works. You can zoom in and see just a section of the graph. Also, we can annotate it and put labels in here. Just click off that. And also, you've got at the end the numbers, which show the actual final numbers, the latest numbers at the end there, so you can actually compare the numbers. So this also enables you to do other things, like you can save it as a PNG by clicking on there. So some of our colleagues like to do this because they can then take that chart and put it into a slide pack they might show to a minister or anything like that. So it enables them to kind of have some interactivity with the charts. Okay, this is looking at the claimant counts from NoMiss as well, and this is just for the local authority in Newcastle. So you can do charts like this. It's not a good chart for this type of data because it's easy to see what the total number of males are, because you can judge the height of the blue bars, but for the yellow bars, it's not as good because the bottom is moving all the time, so it's hard to estimate what the size of the orange bars are, which are female. So one of the things you could do to get around this is label it. So you can create little text boxes that as you scroll across, it will tell you what month it is, the number of females, and the percentage that are female as you move across. So that does help, even though this isn't the most appropriate chart, and it does the same with males as well. Again, you can have the interaction things here. Let's see if we can get this to zoom in. Oh, okay. Okay, so that's not working, but normally you can zoom in and you can see different bits of it. It has zoomed in a bit there, and then zooms out. Yeah, there you go. That should have worked on the other chart as well. So if you're interested in a particular date range, you can zoom in, see that date range, download it as a PNG, and then double click if you want to go back to the, usually works, back to the main chart. Okay, so also what we find is a lot of our users also want to play with the data themselves. So we have a feature here where they can download the data. So sometimes we can have multiple things they can download. So they can click on a download button for the ESA data figures, and they can option to download as a CSV or an Excel file. So if we download it as an Excel file, it downloads it here, and then it opens up the file in Excel, which means that people can then see the visualizations that tell the story about the data, but then they can also open up the Excel file as well and play around with it as well. So we use this kind of format if we're doing like weekly reports. We're reading a new data each week, and the text generally stays the same, but we can change the numbers in the text, and we can compare how the charts compared to previously, and then people can play around it and use it themselves as well. So one of the disadvantages of having the download button is it does increase the file size. So sometimes we have to be aware of that people, if they're using old devices, they might have problems loading the web page. If we have lots of download links, it does make it quite a bit bigger. So there are lots of other guidance in RStudio to help you if you're wanting to use rmarkdown. So there's lots of different advice out there. So if you just Google rmarkdown charts or Plotly charts, you can get lots of different advice here. So there's lots of different charts and types you can do. So we've not really gone into lots of different charts today. We're just showing how rmarkdown works. So you can click on any of these and get the code for them. It can show you how to do them. There's also a graphing library for Plotly, which has lots of different charts and things that you can do. And maps, which Paul will show you some maps later on. So there's lots of guidance out there to help you if you've not used this before. Okay, so I'm going to pause there. This is just the introduction of rmarkdown. Paul's going to show you a bit more how you can use that going forward. Does anyone have any questions or comments or concerns from the room to begin with, and then we'll look at see if there's any online? Hi.
So it's fantastic that you were looking at sort of colour schemes that were trying to people with visual impairments. Do you have any experience of how rmarkdown is handled by screen readers?
Yeah, no, it's not something I've actually looked at, but I think it's probably been considered. But no, I haven't really thought about that. I won't turn on the audience. Any other questions in the room? Okay, so okay, I just got a question from YouTube saying that when they try to create a new file, it says required package versions could not be found. Check that get options repos refers to a found repository that contains the needed package versions. So I'm not sure if you tried the install packages bit first, if you've ran this command first before trying to use the package. But what you need to do is that, and then in your code, when you load libraries, you need to load the rmarkdown one, which is in here somewhere. I think it's already loaded. Yeah, so I'll look at that offline with somebody if that's more of a technical question, which could be to do with the version of RStudio. I've sometimes found that if some packages you might want to use aren't compatible if you haven't upgraded to the latest version of RStudio, so you might need to check your versions are up to date. Okay, so I'll pass over to Paul then, and he's going to talk to you a bit more about how to extend the use of rmarkdown.
Okay, thanks Penny. Good morning everyone, hello to everyone on the web today. So hopefully then that's given you a bit of a feel for rmarkdown and some of its capabilities. Now rmarkdown itself is really great when you've got a structure to the story that you want to tell. If you want to produce a report and you know the order in which you want to tell things and show some charts, rmarkdown is a great tool for that. But sometimes we need to present things slightly differently. So in DWP Digital, we quite often need to get key bits of information across in a way that's really quick, really easy to digest, in a way that we can update very easily. So for this, we quite often create a dashboard. And the package that we use to create dashboards in RStudio is called flexdashboard. So the kind of thing that we're going to look to create over the next 20 minutes or so, so many windows, is one of these. Whereabouts are we, Penny, for my second? There we go. So there's a dashboard. So that's the kind of thing that you can produce with flexdashboard. And we'll talk a little bit about how to control the structure of that page in terms of the spaces that we have, the size of those different areas for the charts, how we can create new pages, and I'll also look at some sort of interesting ways of actually displaying some data as well. So, well, let's start from scratch. So how do we create a flex dashboard in RStudio? So let's go back into the R window. And so in a similar way to creating our markdown document, first of all, you need to install the package, which is done in exactly the way as Penny showed for markdown. So it's install, and the package is called Flex Dashboard. And once you've done that, it's fairly easy then to create a basic Flex Dashboard. So it's kind of an add-in to our markdown. So it's effectively an R markdown template. So we create a new R markdown document. We choose from template, and provided it's installed correctly, we should have Flex Dashboard as an option there. So let's try that. Okay, so you can see here we've got the very basic code, and in the same way that it gives you a kind of a demo for our markdown. So let's just knit that, and we get a sense of what it looks like. So we'll call this test.rmd, get that knit. And you can see, we'll look at the code in a second, but what you can see is we've got a basic dashboard here. We've got 3 spaces, so we've got space for a big chart on the left and 2 smaller charts on the right here. And it's kind of structured it structures it in columns, so we define the size of the 2 columns, and depending on how many charts we have in those columns, it'll fit them in terms of rows. So you can see we've got, at the moment, we've got no title, we've got chart A, B, and C, so it's all fairly dull at the moment. So let's go back into the code and see what we can do with that. So let's call this Newcastle Talk. And and let's have a look at how the code actually works. So you can see first thing we've got here is, obviously we're calling the library flex dashboard. The next thing that happens is that we're creating the first column. So you can see there's a kind of fairly unusual structure to this. So if you put some dashes under a line, that tells flex dashboard that you want to create a new column. So that doesn't actually have to be called column. We could call that anything. It's the dashes underneath that define that as being a column. And we're declaring how wide we want that column to be. So you can see we've got first column there of data width 650, and then we've got a second column of 350. So that's why we get the larger column on the left. Now they don't have to add up to 1,000. It could be 6 and 4 or 7 and 10, and it just kind of structures them accordingly. So we've got those two columns. We're telling Flex Dashboard that within that first column we want to create a chart that we've called chart A. Let's call that interesting chart, and we'll put something interesting in there later. So we've got a first title there for our chart. We then create the second column, and we've got two charts, chart B and chart C. So we'll look at how we put things into these charts shortly, but let's have a go at changing some widths. So we'll create two of equal width now, 650 and 650. We've had a look at changing the title there. We can also add pages to a Flex dashboard. So whereas a series of dashes indicates a column, we can also create pages. So we can create first page, and rather than use dashes, you can use equal signs. And you can see it recognizes it. Once you put 3 equal signs there, it knows that's going to be a page. So we can create our first page, and we can create, where are we? Second page. And then we can add, quite often we'll add a little bit of context to the charts or background information on another page. Just so, one of the reasons for doing a dashboard in the first place is you want to minimize the amount of text. You don't want people to have to read it. So we make things as visual as possible, keep the text down to a minimum. So sometimes we have that little bit of extra context on a different page. So let's see how that runs. So we can see the title there now is Newcastle Talk. We've got our box for interesting chart, which we don't have yet. And we've got our second page there with a little bit of background information. So you can see how this is starting to build up into something resembling a dashboard. I should have asked at the start, actually, has anyone used Flex Dashboard before? Is this, no? Okay. I'll start, keep it simple to begin with. So that's your basic structure. Let's look at how we can get some data into one of these then. So I've done something pretty similar to Penny in that I've downloaded some publicly available data from NoMiss just to have a look at what kind of charts we can produce. So I'm going to close this one down and let's open this bit of code back up again. So this is the code that produces the dashboard I showed at the start. So let's briefly remind ourselves. So you can see we've got 3 columns there. The middle column is the widest because it's got a nice map in there that you might want to be able to play around with and zoom in, and this Sankey chart at the bottom that also requires a bit more space. And then we've got 2 charts, 3 charts, and there's nothing really on this page that we haven't already seen. So you've got the 3 pages at the top that are just defined by the equal signs underneath the titles, and the columns that we've defined with the dashes. The only thing I've done here actually that's slightly different is to make the titles bold, which is just something you can do in rmarkdown with a bit of HTML, or as Penny showed earlier, a couple of stars that makes things bold. So let's have a little look at the code that produces these things. In fact, let's look at the chart first. So I don't think I'm going to have time to go through all of these, so if there are any particular interest, I'll probably leave a bit of time at the end and we can go back to some. But just starting at the top left there, what we've got is a basic line chart. So we're looking at employment rate over time. And you can see we've got it broken down into the total number of people, percentage of people, and then we've got it broken down by men and women. And this is a very simple chart. It's just done in Plotly, so it's got all the features that Penny showed earlier. You've got the zoom, you've got the download as PNG, and so on. But it's quite a striking chart because there's a really clear trend. So you can see since sort of 73-ish, 71-ish, you've got the proportion of men in employment has broadly speaking gone down quite a lot. The proportion of women has gone up, and that's not really a surprise. And the overall percentage of people in work has it's had its ups and downs, but it's remained pretty static. There's a couple of interesting features that I'm not sure I can entirely explain. So around about 2008, all three of those lines you can see go down. That's not a surprise because of the financial crisis. Something, not being an economist or a historian, that I'm not quite so sure on. There's a nice, interesting bump here around about 1990, which was the end of the Cold War, roughly, but I don't know if that's related. If there's anyone in the room that's got any insight into that. I didn't mean to look it up after the last talk I gave, but never got around to it. But there's quite a clearly defined bump there. And if we do know what these are, one of the things we might want to do is to add some annotations, because we don't want people to have to do all the thinking and the work for themselves. And that's really easy to do using a Plotly chart. So having to flick between the windows here. Let's go back to the code. I say it's easy to do. I hope I've got it all ready now. Here we go. So what we've done here is within that bit of Plotly code, in fact, I'll talk through the Plotly code more generally first, actually. So what we're doing is we're taking a CSV and loading it into a data frame called employment rate, which you can see when it should appear in this window over here. So that's the data we're working with. So it's daily data, no, monthly data. There's the numbers that we're using there. So we're defining the x-axis as date, and then we've just got the number of people, men and women. So what we can do to make this a bit more interesting is add some annotations. So annotation 1, we can define, so we're giving it a reference of x and y, which means it will position itself according to the different data points rather than to the page itself, which you can also do. And we're telling it we want it to point at the data point where 228, so we want x is 228 and y is 228. We can define how we position that text in terms of how it's aligned. We can add a bit of context. So here, maybe we don't know what happened, but we would obviously, in presenting this, we would work out what was going on and make sure that that was clear to the user. And then you can add some arrows that kind of point to a nice bit of data to show you what's going on. So then, to actually put this into the chart, this is where it defines the Plotly chart and builds it. We can, after the chart as it exists, we can add a little pipe, and we can tell it just to put in that annotation. And hopefully, the dangers of doing this on the fly, hopefully that'll work. So when we build this now, it should have an annotation that says what happened here, or something along those lines. There we go. And you can see it's not very well positioned, but as you've seen with the X and the Y, we can kind of move that across, change the angle of the arrow, and it's quite easy to manipulate that kind of thing. Okay, so let's move on to the next chart. So what we've got next is, let's look at the map. So maps are something we use an awful lot in DWP Digital because we've got quite a lot of local data, job centres around the country and all that kind of thing. So this is just obviously a demo using dummy data. So we're looking at, this is based on the percentage of people in different areas who are in the kind of professional higher level occupations. And what we've done is, so the size of these circles represents the number of people in those areas, so that gives a sense of the kind of scale that we're looking at. And the colour represents that proportion of people who are in those different groups, so the proportion that are in that kind of higher level professional group. So what you can see, If you were, particularly if this was something that we were presenting to a customer, they might well be interested in areas where we have a lot of people who are at the higher end or lower end. So you can see Birmingham here. We can click into. So you can see there's 750,000 people, and the percentage in those managerial or professional professions is about 7.8%. One of the interesting things about maps, and one of the reasons I really like using them, is that you can see patterns that you couldn't otherwise pick up. So if you just had an Excel sheet or any other format with a list of local authorities, you can't really see what's going on in a kind of broader regional sense. Whereas one of the things you can see quite clearly here is that the south of England and London is very, very blue. So there are a lot of people, again, perhaps not a surprise, but in kind of the real DWP world, we might highlight some interesting trends there. But yeah, so within London, a lot of areas where the percentage in managerial professions is quite high. So let's have a quick look at the code for this. So I think it's this one, yep. So managerial and professional occupations. So one of the things about producing maps is that you obviously need a mapping file as well. So if I just run through this, so it brings those tables into this area. So what we've got is an LA mapping file, so site locations, which is the 380 or so local authorities. So you can see we've got a local authority code and name, which we can merge onto the actual data. And we've got a longitude and latitude, which is crucial for actually positioning those dots on the map. It's moved. There we go. So we can also see the final data set then, once we've merged on that kind of mapping data, is sitemap data 2, which must be this one. So this is the file that actually gets put into that map. So you can see we've got number of people, number in those managerial professions, longitude and latitude, and then I've just converted that to percentage as well. The other thing that I've done is just write a little bit of code to control that marker size, so the circles, just based on the number of people. So I think it's number of people divided by 75 or something like that to get the sizes roughly right. And then there's a little bit of code as well that divides all of these data points in the managerial percent column into quintiles. So the top 20% were blue, going down to red. So that's the mapping file. I'm going to pause just for a moment, actually, having done 2, to see if there's any questions.
Structural question regarding columns. Columns are subdivided by rows.
So yeah, so you create a column, and then, in fact, I'll go back to the code. Once you've created a column, it's just how many charts you put in there that determines the number of rows. So you don't declare a row, it just kind of positions them.
As opposed to specifying a grade within.
That's right, yeah. So I've never, so you can either structure your dashboard by columns or you can structure it by rows, but I'm not sure there's a way to very easily control both at the same time, if you see what I mean. It's kind of automated. Okay, so let's go on to the next one. Where are we up to? I'll do one more, and it's one of my favourite ways of displaying data, actually, which is a Sankey chart. I don't know, I think they're quite popular at the moment, Sankey charts, so you've probably come across them, but the basic idea is that you can use a Sankey chart either to look at kind of flows, how things move between different states, or, as I've done here, just to look at breakdowns, how different kind of elements break down into different subgroups. So what we've got here, and you can probably tell that I did this talk initially in Leeds and I've not got around to changing the data. So we've got people in Leeds on the left-hand side, broken down into their economic activity group. So whether they are economically active or inactive, which then subsequently breaks down into, so those that are active, they might be employed, they might be self-employed, they might be unemployed, and those that are inactive, it might be due to retirement or sickness, disability, and so on. So it's just a way of kind of looking at a whole and then breaking it into parts in a way that's quite visual. You can actually, once you've got, if you do it with flows, you can actually have loops coming back round as well, so you can see kind of how people move between different states as well, which is quite a good way to show things. And one of my favourite things about this is the nice way that you can move things around. So once you've created it, you can kind of restructure it slightly in the way that sort of makes the most sense to you and your customers. And it's nicely interactive as well, so you can kind of hover over the different data points and see how many people are there. It's kind of missing a space there, but we can adapt that. So you can see the kind of the stocks there and the flows as well between things. So the number of those in leads that were inactive is about 171,000. I'll show you the code for this because it's really quite simple for such a nice way of presenting data. So just bear with me, too many charts here. Oh. This one, right, here we go. So the way the Sankey chart works is, first of all, you need to define your nodes. So the nodes are those rectangular boxes. So we've got leads, active, employed, self-employed, and so on. So there are, I think there's about 11 different nodes there, states that people can be in. And then we need to define the flows between them, which we've called links here. So what we're saying is that the flow line between leads and active, which is, so that the nodes are kind of numbered automatically. So the first one you put in is node 0, so active is node 1, employed is node 2, and so on. So the flows between 0 and 1, which is leads who are active, is 389,000. Between active and employed is 291,000, and so on. So you just kind of build up that kind of data structure ready to form the Sankey. And then it's really easy. I should have said, actually, this is using a package called Network D3 for anyone who's ever come across that or wants to. Once you've done that then, you just create the Sankey using the line Sankey Network. You tell it which ones, where your links are, which we just defined here. You tell it where your nodes are, which we defined here. And then it'll just build up that chart for you. So I think I'm probably going to pause there and see if there are any questions coming in, either from the room or from the web. So I'll start with the room. Any further questions from the room? All very quiet here. Any online? Let's have a look. Anything else come in? Nope, nothing at the moment. So, well, I guess we've got 10 or 15 minutes left, so we can kind of do whatever suits people, really. I can keep going through the other types of chart. If there's any kind of ways that people would like to see how we can manipulate any of the charts we've already done, adding extra labels, adding extra context, anything like that, happy to try and do that on the fly, and we'll see how that goes.
Out of interest, my experience, Rose's experience with Shiny is that you can select inputs or drivers or sliders. Now, interesting in the plotting, can you identify or click on particular points and extract information directly from it using dashboard in the same way, or is it
It's
visualization as opposed to an interrogation?
Yeah, it's a visualization rather than interrogation. So with Shiny, yeah, you can kind of define how you want that data to be structured as a user, can't you? Whereas with flexdashboard, the creator kind of defines how that's all laid out. So what you can do is...
You can embed our Shiny bit into the flexdashboard as well.
As well? Oh.
Yeah, so you can combine together. We don't do that at the moment because internally we don't have an R Shiny server, so we can't use R Shiny. So that's why we use them properly. You can actually, there's lots of stuff online. If you Google our shiny markdown, then you can actually combine the two together.
Yeah, so one of the things we can do, if we think there are particular bits of information that people would need to know about different areas, we can control what gets put gets put into the labels there. And I'll show you quickly how that's done.
So one of those boxes could have an our shiny chart in it.
Yeah. Let's go back to the... Ooh, zooming into southern France there, I think. So yeah, there's a bit in here that I should be able to find fairly quickly. Yeah, so this bit here where we've got pop-up. So you can define your pop-up to, as we've got at the moment, to show the number of people and to call this data point, and to show the percentage managerial and call this data point. But we can define those how we like. Yeah. Any other questions?
Why did you decide to use RStudio rather than?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, there's a lot of visualization tools out there. Many of them you have to pay for. So RStudio is a kind of an open source free bit of software that we can use. And it's really, I mean, part of it is that we had the expertise within the team anyway, because we've used R quite a lot before. So to develop this kind of dashboard quite quickly is an easy thing to do. I've used D3 and C3 to produce charts and web pages before, which by comparison takes a lot of resource and a lot of time to kind of work out exactly how those work, whereas with something like flexdashboard and kind of the inbuilt packages like Plotly and Leaflet and Network D3, they're very easy just to adapt to exactly what you need, I would say. So that's one of the reasons, really. And the other thing is that we've got a direct link into our the data that we work on within the department through RStudio. That's kind of all set up and nice kind of data pipeline that we can use. So I guess 3 reasons there. Yeah.
We showed them the table in the thing as well.
Yeah.
And if anybody's interested and wants to get started, we're very happy to share our code with you. So if you want to leave us an email address, we can email you the code and the CSVs if you want to have a play around with it yourself.
Yeah, so this is another thing that you can put into flexdashboard, or obviously into a standard R markdown document, which is just a way of presenting tables. Was this using data table package? I think you wrote this one, didn't you? So there's a package called data table that allows you to do this. And you can, as you can see, you can kind of highlight different cells based on values and that kind of thing, which makes it quite quick to kind of pick out the key points from the table. So I'll go quickly to the code, although it's not my code, but I'll try and that's this bit, isn't it? So yeah, so that there's a lot of data processing code going on there, just to crunch the numbers, and then the bit that actually produces the table kind of lost somewhere. Let's have a look. There we go. DT data table. So that's the package that you use, and then you can kind of. I think this is quite a kind of a complex table that's got quite a lot of interesting information in it. But the basic structure to create a data table from a data frame in RStudio is really quite straightforward. And again, you can just get kind of basic code to do that from various places on the web, quite simply.
Yeah, one of the benefits of that table is you can sort the columns ascending and descending. So for some people who want to explore the data but don't want to necessarily output it to Excel, you can just click on the titles and sort them. You can search in the search box. If you've got a long list of local authorities and you're interested in just one, you can write the name in and it will just bring that one up. And as Paul said, we've shaded the top quintile and the bottom quintile and the colours, so you can see which ones are the best or worst performing in particular things as well. So, and you can also download it and print it and copy it. So it's a good way of, not necessarily an ideal thing within a dashboard, but it's a good way of kind of helping people kind of dig into the data themselves if they want to explore it a bit more.
Okay. Any fight? Yeah.
So does the DWP huge amount of effort that takes to make these things? Do you share that with the organisations?
A lot of the stuff that we do is quite sensitive, so the team we work in is, I think Penny said at the start, working with agile teams that are producing digital products, and it's based on data around things like universal credit. So we share them internally, so we have a web server that allows us to upload them and present these to anyone within the department through kind of departmental kit. And there might be things at some point that we can share more widely, but at the moment I think pretty much everything we've done has been internal.
There's lots of things that are published as national statistics which are thoroughly QA'd, and we know the data is reliable and robust and has gone through particular methodologies to clean it up and make sure it's confident that we can trust that data. We deal with quite a lot of data that comes in on a daily basis on universal credit and other benefits, and we want to use that to help people make decisions, and the people making decisions don't always need to know the exact number. They just want to know roughly how many people will be affected. If they did this, is it going to affect 100 people or 100,000 people? How is it going to affect? So from that, we don't always have time to do a lot of QA of the data, but we can have a quick, rapid turnaround using RStudio and markdown to give them an indication and evidence enough to make their decision, but not necessarily something that would be publicly trustworthy and a national statistic that is actually kind of has to have a lot more work going to it to validate it.
And this kind of thing lends itself quite well to that sort of fast decision making, because once you've got that sort of data pipeline in place from the, our databases within DWP into something like this, then it's very quick to just turn around. So if people want to make decisions based on the latest data, then within, it's literally click a button to get this kind of thing and then upload it. So yeah, quite handy from that point of view. Sure. So I think you require ggplot. That's a prerequisite for Plotly, so it uses some of that functionality. But the key difference for me is, from a user point of view, is that it's interactive. So whereas a Plotly one just comes out as a static chart, with this you can kind of control what happens when people hover over different things, and you've got all the different functionality that we've had a quick look at. You can actually turn on and off different parts of the chart as well. So if you just want people, you can do that there. So yeah, for me it's more about functionality. Yeah,
they're very, very similar, and you can have different layers in Plotly. So we just like it because it's a bit more interactive, and because we can't use Shiny, then Plotly is a good alternative. But we do use ggplot too as well to do quite high level charts and summarise things in a clear way as well.
Want to come and stand up? We're being indicated to both be on camera. Any further questions? No? Anything else on the coming through from YouTube or anywhere? No? Okay, I think we'll probably call time there. We're going to be around for the next half hour or so, so if anyone wants to come and ask questions after the event, that's absolutely fine.
Yeah, if you'd like to see some of the code in more detail, or leave us your email address, we're happy to send stuff out to you.
Yeah, well, thanks very much for coming, and thanks to everyone who's on the web today. That's great.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.